All right, guys, it is masterclass time. So I am super excited to invite our guest speaker. His name is Mr. Dorsey, and he is the founder and CEO of Simple Life Hack, where he's going to be educating you guys on business funding made stupid simple. Okay, so I'm super excited to invite him to speak with you guys. Mr. Dorsey, how are you? You have the floor.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm extremely excited to be here, especially with all of those wins. I'm already in a winning circle, so I love to hear that. I love to see people growing, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to share information on. Obviously, entrepreneurs love to use other people's money, right? We speak on that all the time, and so, but in my experience, I come across a lot of entrepreneurs who don't either use credit at all or don't know how to maximize their credit, right? And so this presentation is very simple. I want to break down the process in order for you guys to know what it takes to get approvals in this process, especially during the times that we're in now. So if you'll give me just a second, I want to share my screen. I need the permission to be able to share it.
Okay, it should be good now.
There it is. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay. So we're going to go an overview of the funding playbook. So as she mentioned, I'm the founder of a company called Simple Life Fix. We like to take complicated financial matters and make them into a simplified, duplicatable process that everyone can use to start their journey or scale their journey, right? And so we help entrepreneurs, aspiring on, entrepreneurs, and consumers get the capital they need in order to scale in order to either start or scale their business, right? The main focus we like to focus on is putting the power of finances back into the people's hands. The banks don't teach us this info, and most people aren't out here sharing this information. And so I think that it's our responsibility and our duty to be able to share the information that we can with others in order to help them on their journey, right? So a little bit about me. I'm a former college athlete, and I always mention that because, especially being a business owner, I heard you guys talk about VAs, things of that nature. It is important that you know how to build a team, and it's also important that you know how to operate on a team. And I always talk about this first because most people that I speak to, maybe they don't have an extra 10, 25, $100,000, $250,000 in funding. And so I like to speak about this opportunity first because when you do get your hands on this capital, and you do start scaling your business, knowing how to operate on a team and build a team is super, super important. I've been an entrepreneur since 2013. I started just grinding from the very beginning, using debit cards, hustling, sales, things of that nature. Went through, just like any other entrepreneur starting out, very trials, tribulations, and extremely difficult. And so in 2017, one of my mentors started talking to me about credit. And before me growing up, credit was never like a positive thing. It was always like, stay away from that, don't do that, let's let's not use this. But the way that he explained it to me was that we're going to leverage the bank's money in order to build our assets. And so for me coming from not a great financial background, that was huge for me. So by me learning this information, applying this information, and being able to use this information to scale my business, I've also been able to teach this information and to help other entrepreneurs be able to scale their businesses to have access to the capital that they need as well too. We have structured multiple seven figures worth of funding deals going through this personal process, which we are going to break down today, and the business funding process as well. And again, the whole point of this is to take a very complicated process and make it very, very detailed, very, very simple for you to be able to follow and be able to access funding on your own. Okay. So as a disclaimer, I always say this content is for educational purposes only. Past performances do not guarantee future results. These are not typical, but we also like to work with action takers who are not typical people, right? So here's just some examples just to give you guys some overview of what's possible when you do take this information and you do apply it to your life. Okay. So for a couple examples, client number one, this is an Apple card. Most of you should be familiar with the Apple Card. This person originally started our program. They had a $4,000 approval with the Apple Card with their basic in information by utilizing our processes, by putting themselves in position, and by consistently requesting credit limit increases. They have been able to scale their limit from a $4,000 limit to a $36,000 limit within the last 12 months. Another example, this is a founder's card with a bank called PSECU. This client had never been approved for this card. They've tried multiple times, but were always denied. And so they came to us. They were very, very frustrated. We went through their credit report. We did a credit audit. We showed them the exact steps that they needed to do, which on their first round approval, they got an $18,000 approval. Okay. On the right, this client, and I want to talk about credit unions because this is Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're not familiar with Navy Federal Credit Union, you need to get familiar with Navy Federal Credit Union, and you need to get familiar with multiple other credit unions as well too. The reason I say that is because a lot of people hear about the Bank of Americas, the Amexes, the Chase, the big banks, right? The top tier. But the reason most people go to them is because they're the most marketed, but they typically give you the lowest limits because you're more likely just a number in their system, right? They have a lot stricter data requirements. And so this person, I take this as an example for this because this client was typically applying for those big banks. They were only getting $5, $6, $7,000 limits. Their first round with Navy Federal, they were able to get $25,000 approval on their first round for Navy Federal's top tier credit card on their personal side. Now the business. The reason this is about the personal funding is because in order to get the business funding, you need your personal reports in order to fast track business funding and get nice limits. Now, personal funding is great, but we like to transition to business limits because banks give much higher limits at much better interest rates. So for example, this client right here on the left for Bank of America, this client had never been able to get approved for over a $30,000 auto loan. We got them approved one auto loan for $75,000. Now, really quick, for those of you who do have businesses and you do bank with Bank of America, there is an opportunity for you to get up to 5 cars with one inquiry through your business leveraging Bank of America. So that's always huge. The second, we love to leverage lines of credit. So lines of credit are pretty much banks putting money directly into an account that you can access immediately, and you only pay back what you pull out. Lines of credit are great because although we like the business credit cards, the 10, 15, $20,000 limits, for a client who would typically get $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 limits on business credit cards would be able to get the same with the same data points, would be able to get 50 to 75,000 with a line of credit for a bank. So that's huge. The only thing about lines of credit that I do want to mention is that your business must be 2 years old in order to access lines of credit. And then the last one, Business Amex, the Business Platinum, one of the most sought after cards. This was their first business card approval after going through our program. And this client originally started within the lower 600s. We were able to scale them and they were able to get personal funding and access business funding within their first 12 months in our program. Okay. So really quick, just to give you an overview, this program is broken down into 4 really simple modules. The first, we're just going to go over mindset, creating the vision, showing you guys what's possible. Number 2, I don't want to make any assumption of what you guys know about credit. And so I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So before we actually get into the funding, I want to talk about the personal data requirements and data points required in order to get the funding. The third part of this, I'll break down what personal funding is. And then in the 4th module, for those of you who are actually in position, we're going to give you guys a couple plays and accounts that you could utilize today and get some nice limits, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is mindset. So as I mentioned, most people have never been exposed to this information. Most people are figuring this out either through trial and error, something of that nature, but they've never been exposed to a process this simple in order to acquire the funding that they need. And so I want to make sure that we are properly educated in this process. The biggest point I want to point out here is that for first-time credit users, the average limit is $1,000 for their first credit approval. When you do apply this information, a lot of our first-time clients end up with between $8,000 and $25,000 limit approvals per credit card. Okay. So we what we like to teach in this program is that we're always taught about chasing the money, chase the money, pursue the money, chase the money. But we like to shift that example into focusing on the information. The information will bring the value, and then once you have the information and the value, then you're able to apply that over and over again to do what you need to do. The first thing I want to say, this is not an overnight process. This has phenomenal benefits when you do complete it, but this is not an overnight process. The earliest we've seen some people do have great credit, and they are able to utilize this and apply this information immediately. Sometimes you may have to go through a credit repair process or a credit building process, which could take 6 to 24 months. Right. Um, as mentioned, the key takeaways is that you will need good credit in order to optimize in order to optimize your approvals. Um, and then wherever you are on your journey, we're going to give you guys resources and tools in order to get to the end goal, all on this presentation, right? So, as I mentioned, the first step to personal funding and business funding is making sure that your personal credit report is in order and structured properly to maximize the approvals that you get. So there is a 21% national average of credit denials, and it's mostly not because they had bad credit, it's mostly just because their personal information was not structured the right way, and that is possible. Also, the national average credit limit for a single card would be $3,900, roughly $3,900. The key takeaway for part of this is that your information, there are three credit reporting agencies: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. Your information must line up exactly across all three of those in order to get approvals, as well as you need one name and one address. We ideally, if there are prior addresses, we want to get those taken away, but really we just want the one current address matched up. So these are the data points required in order to maximize your credit report. And when these data points are maximized, we are able to access six figures in funding on the personal side and the business side. So, as I mentioned, there are three credit reporting agencies: TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. We want less. So, a lot of people talk about less than 30% utilization on your cards. 30% is okay. For maximum approvals, you really want to be less than 10. But in order to really get nice approvals, you absolutely, at the bare minimum top, never want to go over 29, 30%. But for maximum approvals, you really want to be between that 1 and 9%. And that's per account. I hear a lot of people talk about, well, you just need 30% utilization overall for all of your accounts. That is not true. You need to be less than 30%, ideally 1 to 9% on every single account that you have, no matter how big or how small. Now, inquiries are huge. Inquiries, they don't hurt your score a lot, but when you have too many inquiries in a time, you are seen as credit desperate. So when we like to run these plays, we like to see no more than 2 inquiries per credit reporting agency, ideally none. Okay. Payment history. It must be 100%, not 99%, not 98%. It must be 100% because when you want large amounts of funding from these banks, you want them to know that your credit history is in order to 100% pay back. If you have the 99%, if you would have had 100 and somebody has 99%, they're going to get a quarter or half of the approval limits that they would have originally got approved for if they had 100% payment history. Credit age. We want to show these banks that we have experience with dealing with our money and our credit as well. So we ideally want our credit age over 4 years. No derogatory remarks. It must clean. No collection accounts. No charge offs. Bankruptcies. Nothing of that. We want to be super clean. And ideally, we want more than 10 accounts. Obviously, the more accounts, the better, right? So the number one, as I mentioned previously, the number one reason that people get denied is not because they're not credit worthy, but it's because that their information doesn't line up. And the reason that happens is because I use an example here, John Doe. There could be multiple John Does in the world, and you may have great credit, but another John Doe does not. And because these are algorithms, because these are computers, these are computer generated responses, we want to make sure that we are the only one that they're looking at when they look at us. So on the name, again, it must match exactly. So on this one, if it's John Doe on TransUnion, it needs to be John Doe on Equifax. It needs to be John Doe on Experian as well. If you have a middle initial, the middle initial needs to show up across all three as well too. If you spell it out, it needs to be spelled out. It needs to line up 100% exactly. Same way for date of birth. Same way for the social security number. And as I mentioned, the current residency, we really want the current residency to be our only residency mentioned, but if you must have a prior residency on there, it still needs to line up across as the same address, and you don't want more than one current address and one more prior address. So now that we went over the basics, I want to talk about what personal funding is and what this process that we talk about. So, personal funding is us leveraging our credit score, leveraging our credit ability to go to multiple banks at one time and access the funding we need. Now, this presentation is talking more about credit stacking. When most people go apply for a credit card, they don't actually know which reporting agency, which bureau they pull from, and most people just go for one or two credit cards at a time. We like to maximize our approvals by understanding which banks pull from which credit reporting agencies. We typically like to do a 5 card stack for each credit reporting agency. So, for example, when most people are applying for just one or two credit cards at one time, we like to go for 15 up to 10 to 15 credit cards at one time to maximize our approvals. This is huge because the average personal total limit is for in America is a little over $30,000. A lot of our clients do $100,000 plus on their first round of funding, which creates a lot of opportunity and leverage for us to be able to go for us to be able to go utilize this capital in order to scale our businesses, right? So the benefits of personal funding and types of funding that we teach to go get. So we like credit cards personally because they give the best limits and they also give the best interest rates. A lot of the personal credit cards and business credit cards have introductory 0% interest from anywhere 6 to 24 months. So for being an entrepreneur and going to get the bank's money in order to scale your business, that gives you a lot of time in order to make a profit on that money before you really have to pay it back. So credit cards are the most typical account. It's what's considered a revolving account. So you have a set limit. You cannot exceed that limit. And when you utilize that card, the money that you utilize when you pay it back, that money becomes available to you again. Again, that's typically what we like to focus on because they're the easiest to stack. Personal loans are fine too. They are loans with a predetermined amount and a predetermined payback. That is money that is deposited directly into your bank account. And then, like I said, you have preset terms, preset amount, and expiration date. Auto loans. We like auto loans. Auto loans are typically your highest approval. They're typically the easiest to get approved for. And when you take care of those accounts, they provide a lot of history to your credit profile and make you look more bankable to the banks. Okay. The benefits of personal funding, obviously, opening new businesses and scaling new businesses is the biggest reason that we like it. As mentioned, the 0% interest. And when you use credit cards, we teach to use credit cards over debit cards because when you utilize your credit cards and you make the same expenses that you were on your debit card, you're going to generate points. When you keep utilizing those over and over again, especially for those who run ads, you're going to build up points really, really quick. And so you can leverage that for free flights, free hotels, and cash back as well, too, for whatever that you may need it for. So, ooh, give me 1 second. I'm not sure why that just did that. Apologies. Give me 1 second, little technical difficulties. switch this. Perfect. Give me 1 second. I'll get right back to it. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Dorsey.
Perfect. Okay. Apologies for that. Let me get back to it. So, as mentioned, I don't want to make any assumptions, and I want to make sure that we provide the most amount of value possible. Some of you may not have a credit report built out, and so we like to teach how you would build a credit report to put yourself in position to leverage this if you are not currently able to do so. The first step is a secured credit card. The two that we like to use are Capital One and the Discover It secured credit card. These are essentially savings programs where you pledge a certain amount of money to the bank. And what they do is they will report that limit and that utilization to the credit reporting agencies. Now, after we like to use secured credit cards that upgrade to unsecured after a while. Typically, most of these will do this after a 6 to 12 month period, as long as you show that you are reliable with your account. Okay. So those can be huge to getting yourself in the door and able to get better credit cards as you venture on. Um, Secured loans. Secured loans work almost the same way as a secured credit card, where you pledge a certain amount of money to a bank and they will report that to the reporting agencies. Although these are typically much easier to utilize because you put money in a bank and you can just go to the bank and get that money out as compared to using a credit card. I like to use Navy Federal a lot. And the reason I like to use Navy Federal a lot, and this is one of the reasons I like to use Navy Federal a lot, especially when building somebody out from the beginning, is because they have what's called a pledge loan. So as I mentioned, we like to see 10 accounts on our credit report in order to go get funding. So if you're in Navy Federal, they have what's called a pledge loan. On these pledge loans, you must put at least $250, but you can get multiple of these pledge loans at one time. We have our clients do two or three different pledge loans at once. So out of the 10 accounts that they need, we can go to Navy Federal and get 3 accounts immediately, 2 or 3 accounts immediately. Auto loans. This is really, really huge. And I like to always talk about this because this is the hack for getting auto loans and higher approvals. So typically when you get approved for an auto loan, whatever amount you pay off, banks will typically give you double that amount. Okay. So the hack that I like to teach, so for example, if you purchase a 20 or $30,000 car and you successfully pay that off, when you go back and apply for another car, those banks will give you $50,000 to $60,000 for your next car. We like to use Swap a Lease as a hack, because what you can do is you can go on Swap a Lease and you can take over somebody else's car. This is somebody else's car who maybe they got it, maybe they just decided they just don't want it anymore, and so they put it up on a website called Swap a Lease, which you can go on there, and as long as you qualify, you can take over the remaining lease on their auto loan. The benefit to that is if they have a $40,000-$50,000 car and you only pay on it for 6 to 12, and a lot of our clients utilize this hack and ways to utilize this in order to actually put cars on Turo and generate passive income that way. Some other in installment accounts we utilize to help you build out your report. If you do rent, you need rent reporters. It is the easiest, most cost-efficient program that you can utilize to put real estate history on your account. They charge you $9.95 a month, and all they do is you send them proof of your rent payments, and they will report that to the credit reporting agencies. They can also backdate up to 2 years on your credit report as well too. And for a rent payment being typically most people's biggest payment, that can add a lot of history and a lot of strength to your credit report. Self. This is essentially a savings program where you save to yourself. You pay $25 a month. You pay that until you save $500, $500 savings account into self, and then once you pay that $500, they will send that money back to you in a one lump sum payment. But once you make that first $25 payment, they will report a $500 account in your name in good history. Credit Strong is another example of that as well too. But is where Self only reports a $500 account. Credit Strong can report accounts up to $10,000, and their programs work the same exact way. Kickoff is almost the same exact way as Self, except they will report a $500 account and you only pay $2 a month. There now the only difference is it's not a savings program, so you don't actually get your money back. But for cost efficiency, you can pay $2 a month and you can have a $500 account in good standing being reported on your behalf. So trade lines, this is huge, and a lot of people do not utilize trade lines enough. So we like to use authorized user trade lines. These are accounts that when somebody has an account, they can put you on as an authorized user. When you utilize this, their payment history for the account that they add you to is inherently put on your credit report. Now, these are great to use. A lot of you, and what I tell a lot of my clients to do too is call family members, call friends. If they have good credit, ask them to put you on as an authorized user. Now, what typically happens is you would get a card and you have access to their account as well too. What I tell my clients to do is ask them to be an authorized user, and then you would just either shred the card, send the card back to them, whatever. We don't actually want the card and have access to their account. We just want it in order to build access to our credit report. Now, one thing to note, you want the accounts to be 2 years old. You do not want young accounts. And you want good payment history. You do not want to inherit somebody's bad payment history for no reason. And always, 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 never over 20%. Going back to that utilization factor, but ideally under 10%. So, these are some revolving accounts for those of you who may not have credit cards, or who need some credit cards and need something that will report something nice. We like these two programs, the Tomo credit card. You simply, there's no credit check, there's no inquiry. You simply sign up to Tomo, you link your bank account based on your bank account uh, activity. They will give you a credit limit based on that and report that to the credit reporting agencies. Extra debit card, a credit, which is a program that turns your debit card into a credit card. What they do is when you make purchases, so if you go to Walmart, for example, and your bill is $50, they will spot you the $50 payment, and the very next day they will draft that $50 from your account. At the end of the month, they total up all of your total amounts, and they will report that to the credit reporting agencies, which could generate a lot of nice history to your accounts as well too. In summary, building a credit profile from scratch. Again, our report targets are 10 to 12 accounts, mostly primary. You can have one or two authorized users, but you want those 10 to 12 accounts to be mostly primary accounts. Primary accounts are accounts, again, just in your name. 100% payment history, no derogatory, absolutely no derogatories at all. Ideally 4 to 5 years of age. Again, if it's more, the older the better. uh 0 to 3 in inquiries, but again, we really want 0 to 2. Always less than 30% utilization, and one name, one address for instant approvals. And over here on the left is just a recap um of the accounts that we gave you in order to reach that 10 limit approval, that 10 account approval. So once you have your credit report in order and you meet all of the data points listed, now you can start to get prepared for funding. So in the pre-funding stage, obviously you're going to be letting those accounts, you're going to be adding those accounts to your credit report. Once you add those, though, it's imperative that you understand that you do not apply for funding immediately. You want those accounts to age a little bit, so you preferably want 6 to 12 months of age. After the ideally 12 months, if you're in a position that you just absolutely need funding in 6 months, you can, but you will get better results if you wait the full 12 months. As mentioned, the authorized user accounts, great accounts. If you can access them, that's great. We suggest 2 authorized users if possible. We like to get one for age, and we like to get one for a high limit in order to bring those out. And then also, again, you must meet the data points required. Now, when you run these funding sequences, We want to run them after 11 p.m., 11 p.m. Eastern, because what that means is that by then, all customer service reps and all manual underwriting has left the building. So the everything goes into an automated computer generated response. When you apply for things after 11 and it's computer generated and you meet all of these data points, you are in a higher tier than majority of people applying for credit during that time. So they will give you much higher limits. Always use incognito mode, and you absolutely want to make sure anytime, this seems very, very simple, but you want to make sure that your credit reports are unlocked and unfreeze and unfrozen when you do any applications. If they are, you will still get an inquiry, or you will not get an inquiry, but you will waste your application within that system. Income. You can use your personal income, but you can also use household income. You can use household income, and you can also use projected side income. Now, if you use this income, that's fine, but you must be able to document it. I always want to make sure that's clear. A lot of people do just use their personal income from a job, but I want to make sure that you guys know that you can use household income, asset total in your house, or anything that could be potentially liquidated in order for you to get higher limit approvals, right? Your rent or mortgage. This is what I tell all of my clients: half of whatever your rent or mortgage is. First of all, you could have a roommate, you could have a spouse. These banks do not know if you guys split rent or not, and it lowers your monthly expense in order for you to trigger higher limit approvals. When it asks for time and address, you always want more than 2 years. The reason is because you want to be seen as stable. If you're bouncing around all the time, or you're moving around all the time, the banks look at it as a red flag. And so why would they give you money, that, especially unsecured funds, if they don't even know where they would be able to find you at? Job. I talk to a lot of self-employed entrepreneurs. Never put self-employed. If you put self-employed, you will automatically cut your approval limits in half, because the banks do not consider that stable. It's always employed. Even if you just work for your own business, make sure that you put employed, whatever your position is at your business, and how many years you've been there. Now, my suggestion is, if you do that, never put owner. We do not put owner whenever on these applications. Just put something like marketing director, something of that nature, in order to see that you're actually in a position of what seems as stable, and not you being the sole decision maker of these funds. It looks much better to the bank. Anytime that you do on these applications, when you apply for these banks, they will ask if you want checkings and savings. We always choose both, because banks are all about building relationships. These initial approvals are nice, but the more you build a relationship with these banks, the more money they will give you overall. So module 4 is really all about getting you paid. Again, the key whenever you're running these funding sequences is to understand which bank pulls from which credit reporting agency, so that you can line up your applications and maximize your best approvals. By doing this, these are our averages. By running our program, typically majority of our clients get 9 cards. Again, we run between a 10 and 15 account sequence. On the majority of approvals, whenever they get approved, our average is 9 cards, and our total approval across all is an average of $96,000. Our smallest client to date has a 7 card approval. For their first round of funding, they got $78,000. So again, these are just huge numbers compared to when you're looking back at the national average of a total of someone of an age credit profile having $30,000. So TransUnion, I'm going to give you guys a TransUnion plan. I'm going to give you guys the Apple Card play if you don't have it already. So the Apple Card is underwritten by a bank called Goldman Sachs. And what they do is they're going to soft pull you before, and they would give you, so they're going to soft pull you, which means they're going to give you an application. You would insert your personal information and your financial info as well too. Immediately, they will give you your approval and your terms before you accept them, and they will let you know that immediately before you accept it. Only after you accept it would you get the inquiry on your account and actually get the and actually have access to your to your Apple Card. Now the hack to this, we can do a no inquiry hack. When you go through this, you would submit your info, they would bring up your offer, and before you accept the terms, because they've already given you your offer, your offer is already registered in your Apple account. But before you accept the terms, you would just simply freeze your TransUnion, a, accept the terms, and you will get the account immediately. You will have the Apple Card immediately with no inquiry. Now, understand, you must leave that TransUnion. When you do this, you need to leave that TransUnion locked for 1 week, because they will continue to go back and try to put an inquiry on the account at a later date. But past a week, you are good to go. So you can get an Apple Card. You can get the Apple Card right now if you're lined up for free, no inquiry. Experian. A lot of people love Amex. Amex is known for pulling Experian. Now, I do want to let you know, every now and then they do pull TransUnion, depending on the location. Now, they are known for doing financial reviews. So any income that you do put, make sure that it is always verifiable. And periodically, Amex will come back and do a financial review, especially when you're using them really heavy. They may come back and ask for your tax forms as well too. Well, they would ask for a 4506T, and that would allow them to actually pull your credit reports to verify the financial information that you put. Now, typically they only do this if your income exceeds $70,000. So if you're under $70,000, they typically don't do this. It's still possible, but they typically don't do this. Anything $70,000 or above, they will run financial reviews periodically. Now, we love Amex because they are not inquiry sensitive. You can have 5, 6, 7 inquiries on your account, and you can still get approved for these credit cards. You can actually get approved up to 4 credit cards at one time with the same inquiry. And every 60 days, we always teach to go back through Amex and apply for new cards, because you're already in their system and you can get approved for new cards without any hard inquiry. So every 60 days, you can go back to Amex and add new accounts, new limits, and continually build up your profile. They do a pre-approval application for that. I always suggest pre-approvals first, because if you just do a hard inquiry or just an application without the pre-approval, you will get a hard inquiry. There is no reason to get a hard inquiry if you're not even going to get pre-approved. So I always want to make sure to mention that. Equifax. Chase loves to pull Equifax. You can actually get up to 2 cards at once at the same time with one inquiry. I do want to mention though, Chase is very inquiry sensitive. They're a good bank. They're a great relationship bank on the personal side and the business side, but they are inquiry sensitive and personal. 5 new credit cards on your Equifax in a 24-month period, they will start to close your accounts. So if you do decide to utilize Chase, I want you guys to be very aware of that. Now, when you run these plays again, the key actions is to always complete your autofill settings in your computer. You can set up your autofill for name, address, phone number, things of that nature. The faster you do these apps, the more official you look and the better your approval, because these sites do have timing, and if you do take too long or they do time out, then your application will not process. So always, again, make sure that your autofill settings are complete. Again, we always use incognito mode. You always want to utilize your pre-approvals. Then you would submit your applications, and then you would strategize. So strategize, once you submit your applications, you're either going to get an approval or denial. When you have the right data points and when you do it the right way, you should get instant approvals. That's what we like to do. But in the approval you are denied, I want to give you guys the process for that as well too. Just because you're denied, I always want to say this, just because you're denied, It doesn't mean that you won't get approved for that bank ever. You just are going to need to clean it up, and then you're going to have to give that bank at least a 12-month period before you go back and try to open up new app applications for them. So the next business day, if you do go into pending, any pending applications, we call and follow up the next day immediately. If you are rejected, we also call the next day and we ask for a reconsideration. Majority of the time, especially if your information is lined up, most of it is most denials are just verification problems. So majority of the time, once you call, verify who you are, you're good to go. And what I like to teach my clients as well too is even if we get an approval, remember these are just computer generated approvals. They're not manual reviews. So you already got a nice limit, but I like to tell my clients to call the next day and ask for a reconsideration for a higher limit. But it's always crucial to mention that you really want to build a relationship with that bank. Let them know that you love the bank, you really want to use their accounts, and you really are interested in building the relationship with that bank for the long term. And the majority of the time, they will give you higher limits. Now, within the first month, any applications that are denied, we like to dispute those inquiries. We only like to keep the inquiries for the accounts that we get approved for. I want to take this right here to say, we do not dispute open inquiry or any inquiry attached to an open account, because if you do, they will close your credit card. Also, there are some banks that will require you to do an inquiry in order to open up that bank account. If you dispute the inquiry for that, they will close your bank account as well too. So I want to mention that we can only dispute inquiries for any accounts that were not used in order to open that account. From the 6 month to the 12-month period, again, we like to transition everything. What I teach is to transition everything from debit in order to the credit card. And even if I even have some people say, well, oh, I don't want to use credit at all. Even if you use your credit card and you want to pay it back immediately within a day or two, that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that, but at least put it on your credit card first, because you're going to build the relationship with the bank. And again, you're going to get rewards points and bonuses the more that you utilize your credit card for making the same expenses that you were going to do already. Same thing for the 12-month period. You're going to continue to build out these accounts, continue to grow your limits. And by naturally doing this, they should be giving you credit limit increases. But after that 12-month period, you are able to continue to grow accounts on your personal side, or what I like to teach, which is a little too long to go into tonight, once you establish yourself on the personal side, you would just immediately go to business funding. And so really we teach the first round of personal funding. After you have the first round of personal funding, immediately go to business funding, and we can leverage business funding over and over and over again to utilize to scale our business. Final notes, be responsible. Again, a lot of people, this may be your first time accessing $50,000, $100,000. Understand that leverage is for building and creating assets. We do not get this to go buy liabilities or just blow the money, because at the end of the day, this is leverage. This is not the banks giving you money. This is the banks lending you money. So you want to make sure that you continue to build those relationships. And the more you build those relationships, the more the banks will give you. I always speak on that over and over again. Always take care of your banking relationships. Always take care of your relationships in general. But always make sure to take care of your banking relationships for sure. What I like to say is we like to teach people to get the funding before they need it and at least have access to it, just in case an emergency or an opportunity comes. Now, that's only for the personal credit cards that we talk about, that, not for personal loans. If you get a personal loan and you're using it for growing something, you want to get that, and you want to have that money and have a plan for that money to utilize immediately, because that is, again, a preset amount and a preset payment date. If you have credit card money to the side, you can use that whenever. If you have a personal loan, they're going to want that payment within the next 30 days. Consistency, again, just growing these accounts, building these accounts, constantly building these relationships, and continue to be more bankable to these banks. Terms to know, again, I don't want to make any assumption here at all, but your due date is the due date that your payment is due. You can change that. I feel like that's very basic info, but I want to make sure that you guys understand that your due date, you can change. Your statement date is the date that your credit card balance will close out, and that's the balance that your that the bank will report to the credit reporting agencies. And then the reporting date is the date that will actually be reflected to the three credit agencies. And that's pretty much the end for the day. As far as the personal side, I want to make sure that I give you guys, I try to make this as clear as possible, as seamless as possible. But if you do have any questions, concerns at all, I do want to make sure that I'm able to get those taken care of for you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dorsey. We really appreciate you coming out and pouring into the community and educating us about personal funding and how to get $100,000 overnight. So yes, I do want to open the floor to questions. So anybody who has a question for Mr. Dorsey, go ahead, because he is the expert and he's here for a couple more minutes. Oh, Bruce has a question. Hey, Bruce. All right, go for it.
That's Bruce Hill, New Skills, New You. First of all, we got to start with thank you. You made it really simple and actionable. And as a teacher myself, phenomenal job. I was taking notes on your execution. So I got to throw you the alley-oop, though. How do we get in touch with you? We want to work with you.
So the best way to reach me currently would be on Instagram. You can follow me and connect with me at CEO Dorsey. That's CEO Dorsey.
All right, excellent. Thank you, sir. So my question was actually the slide. How might we go back right before, or can we get a copy of the slides? Is that something we can do, or?
I can't. I've actually never been asked that question before. But I can get this together and send this over for sure. Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So then I guess my question is, for someone who's just started the business but wants to avoid using their personal credit, are there any, let's call them shortcuts? Any recommendations there?
So I get asked this question a lot. And so,
okay, he's ready. Look, he's ready.
Yeah. So I want to attempt to change your mindset just a little bit. Okay. So when you're first starting a business, small business in America is less than $25 million per year in revenue and less than 50 W2 employees. Now, if your business is doing that, you can get corporate credit automatically and you would bypass business credit. There's business credit and then there's corporate credit. I want to make sure that that's huge. So if you bypass the small business requirements in America, which are again, $25 million in revenue or less than 50 employees, you will be able to access corporate credit. Now, if your small business is generating $2 million or more in revenue, then yes, you can go and get business funding without utilizing your personal credit. Now, I want to make sure that it's clear. I like to teach personal guarantee business funding. And again, I didn't do this on this presentation, but I want to give you an example just because we did this. So on the business funding, you can build out business credit. There are different like Quill, Uline, different things of that nature. Those are like very, very simple. You can actually go on YouTube and just Google Uline, Quill, Zorro, just a couple things of that nature. Nav, the NAV app, in order to build your business credit. But until you really separate yourself, you're going to be leveraging your personal guarantor. Now, I like to teach this because when you do the sequence and you do access the personal funding, as mentioned at the end, we only like to use personal funding for our first round. After you have that, you already have the nice accounts on the personal side and the nice limits, where when you go to business, the reason we like business, because if you're getting $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 on the personal side, you're going to get minimal $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 on the business side. A lot of times 50K, like 30 to like $50,000, but you will be leveraging your personal score. I say that to say this: each account on the business side, and I didn't really talk about it, but on the business credit cards, they do not report to the personal side. They report to the business reporting agencies, which are different. You have Business Equifax, you have Business Experian, and you have a Telescore, right? And so those are the business reporting agencies. And you want to use those because the business cards will report to those agencies. They will not show up on your personal side. They will inquire you on the personal side, but the account won't show up on the personal side. The hack to this is each credit card that you open up in your business account will report those 10, 15, 20, $25,000 business credit cards to the business credit reporting agencies. After you build those out for 12 to 24 months, then with those banks that you have the relationships with, then they will offer you unsecured funding where you won't have to put your personal guarantee for future amounts. But for the first 12 to 24 months, you will be leveraging your personal guarantee. And it's honestly the fastest way to access and leverage business credit, because business credit gives you the best interest rates, the highest limits, and typically you get 0% interest 12 to 24 months.
Wow. Thank you, sir. You've expanded my mind on a few things. I thought I knew a little bit about a little bit. Wow, that was really good. So I appreciate you, sir. Thank you again.
I'm glad I could help, for sure. If anybody else has any questions at all, no question is too small. I want to make sure that you guys have everything clear so that you guys can take this and be actionable with this and put this and apply this to your life.
So there's one question in the chat from Michelle. She says, how does she lock her TransUnion account?
So you're going to go to trueidentity.com, make an account with them, and you can immediately access your TransUnion account from there. And then as far as Equifax and Experian, you will have to call them to freeze it, but they can freeze it over the phone immediately.
And this is to avoid a hard inquiry, right?
Yes, it is. You only want to do that, again, I want to make sure this is clear. You only want to do that when running the Apple Card play. You do not, any other account, you want them unfrozen, because otherwise they will not be able to pull the credit report and approve you for the account. And to be clear, on the Apple Play, you do that after you submit your personal information, after you submit your financial info, and then they will show you what you get approved for. Before you accept it, as soon as they pull up that screen, you will see the accept option. You will then lock your TransUnion and then accept it. And again, remember to keep it locked for 1 week to avoid that inquiry, but you still will get the account immediately.
Hello. The 10 to 12 accounts that you mentioned, is it all credit card accounts or bank accounts or a mix of the two?
So those are all credit card accounts, or so there's revolving accounts in there, and there's also there's revolving accounts, and there's also these the secured credit cards and the secured loans.
So I have a question as far as the data points. If we don't have like exactly the data points that you said, should we just avoid applying and wait until we have the data points?
Yeah, so at that point, I want to make sure that you guys understand I didn't talk about the credit repair on this. If you don't qualify, you can go through the credit repair process. When you go through a credit repair process, you have the right under the Fair Credit Reporting Act to challenge anything that is not accurate on your credit report. Even if you know it's accurate, they have to validate and verify the information is accurate. So I always tell people, if your data points are not 100%, go through the credit repair process and demand and make them validate 100%, because the credit repair laws have to be verified 100%. It cannot be 99%. It has to be 100%. So majority of times through a process and consistency, I want to say that's why I say it from the very beginning, it's not an overnight process, but if you stick to it, you can get that negative information cleaned up and removed. Once it's removed, then go for your funding.
Okay, thank you. And
Of course.
then Michelle put something in the chat. She put, is it rare for Amex to pull a hard inquiry for your business when applying for 2 cards? Because she did the incognito and the 2 inquiries still showed up on her personal side.
Now, did they pull it? They should have pulled Experian, correct? Did they pull Experian or did they pull Experian and TransUnion? That's what I was saying. So if it's Experian, so depending on your location, that's what I was saying with Amex. Depending on your location, they typically only pull Experian, but depending on your location, they will pull Experian and TransUnion at the same time. So that's where that's why I was saying that in the beginning, and that's the only time that I've ever seen the 2 inquiries come up.
So how often can you do the credit card stacking?
So only want to do it every 12 months. That's what I mentioned. But so you can do it every 12 months. And again, I didn't talk about the business funding on this. We don't typically suggest it. But you can. We like to leverage the personal side for the first side, and then the 12 months later, just go for business funding. And again, because the business funding, you can apply. So the reason you have to wait 12 months on the personal side is because those inquiries stay there for those open accounts. On the business side, the reason I mentioned that because those inquiries will stay on your report for 2 years. On the personal side, on the business, they're just going to pull your personal to verify that you can handle the business side. And then once that is there, those cards don't report to the personal side. So you can remove the inquiry on your personal side and maintain the business account because it's not an open account reported to your personal side. That's why I talk about we only do the credit card stacking once. And then after that, we go strictly business, because business funding, if you get approved for the account and you remove the inquiry, you can run business funding over and over and over again. And as I mentioned, business funding gives you better limits, because banks know that what you need to use for your business is different than your personal, and you get that 0% interest for a longer period of time.
So when you say over and over and over, is it like every month or like every week, or how often are we talking?
So now remember, I still say every 6 months. I still say every 6 months because again, they're not being reported to the personal, which is the most important part, but they are still being reported to the business profile. So the business side, they can still see how often you are adding new accounts. So it's not that they won't limit you for the approvals, but they will start to limit some of your limits and things of that nature, because you would seen as quote unquote credit desperate.
Okay, so I have a,
I just saw Michelle. I have never seen them pull 2 Experian for the accounts. This is the first I have ever seen this. Anytime I've ever seen the 2 is with Experian and TransUnion. I've never seen them pull 2 with Experian at one time. This is the first time I've ever seen this. But I will say the benefit, as I mentioned with Amex, is that once you're in their system, after you're in their system for 60 days, you can apply for more Amex credit cards over and over again, and you will not get that hard inquiry for sure. Okay,
No, that's a good question.
of course.
What is your best recommendation for removing hard inquiries off TransUnion? I know they got a lot more difficult than the simple 24-hour call-in method.
So I don't use those. I don't use the call-in method. I like to use so I'll be honest with you. So what I like to use, I'm going to give you some games. So in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act governs credit repair. In there, the Fair Credit Reporting Act is referred to as 15 USC 1681. Now, what I like to use is 15 USC 1681 EB, which is permissible purpose. What that states is that in subsection B, that if you do not put written consent to the credit reporting agency, they made the assumption to report the information on your behalf. You did not, because they assume it, does not make it right. And when you actually read the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and this is why it's so crucial, especially when we talk about credit repair, what governs it is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So understanding the laws that govern it is the most important part to credit repair. And in there, Congress immediately separates themselves from the credit reporting agencies, literally saying that they assume the right to report this information. They are not a government agency. They are private companies. So you must treat them just like private companies, just like corporations. And so I use the 15 USC 1681 EB, and I always let them know that I did not give them permission in order to report that on my behalf, and no consent is identity theft. Now, sometimes it may take a couple times, but that is pretty much how you can utilize to pretty much, I'm not going to say remove anything from your credit report, because there's multiple processes and there's different ways that you have to, you know what I'm saying, go through it. But with consistency, you will get them gone.
Oh, cool. Thank you. When sending in this information, do you use strategies like handwritten or certified mail, or do you just yeah, like in those two ways, what is your most, I guess, reliable methods?
Okay, so I like these questions, so I'm gonna definitely give you some hacks. So first of all, always use certified mail, always. Because when we are using the law in order to leverage getting what we desire as a consumer off of our credit report. So what I always like to tell people, court starts in the mail, because when you certified mail, if you keep documentation, I want to let you guys know there are FCRA attorneys. FCRA is short for the Fair Credit Reporting Act. A lot of these attorneys, you can Google them in your area, will work for free, and they will just get paid on the back end. Now, when you approach them, you want to make sure that you have all of your documentation to show how often and how much you have tried to communicate with these private companies, but they are still violating you as a consumer. So I always say do it certified mail and keep copies, because if you go 6 months and they're not working with you at all, just go over to an FCRA attorney, keep track of all of your letters, all of your certified mail, document when they received it, all of their responses, everything, so that you can utilize that. That's what I always say. And then a hack is, so again, we are competing with computers and in applications and when it comes to credit repair. So you want to, handwritten is okay. That's fine. But a lot of times so it's run by a system called eOscar. And eOscar for handwritten letters will often write them off as unreadable, and will just trash it so you won't even respond. So I like to teach to always type. So don't give them any excuse not to say they couldn't read it or understand what you wrote. Always type it. Now, in my hack, in the top of it, I'll always say like, stop effing playing with me. But I'll say stop, and I'll put like the F, and I'll put different symbols, but then I'll color it. And you color it either red or blue, because it triggers eOscar as it can't really read it. And so they're trying to figure out, but because it's legible and they can't read it, then it gets pushed more into a manual review. So you deal more with a person actually understanding law and being able to read it rather than just eOscar. Because and that's why I say credit repair is such a process, because we know our laws and we understand what should be done, but because it's a system, they just want to say it's verified. So when they say it's verified, we always want to ask how it's verified. Anytime they say something, you want to ask why or how. If they say it's verified, ask for how, and don't ask, demand. You need to demand, because as a consumer, we don't ask, we demand, because you assumed to take this right. You took my personal, live my life, because you assume this info. And so that's why I always say certified mail, because court starts in the mail.
Wow. That's awesome.
Of course.
I did not know that. Jesus, I love it. Oh my God. Melanie in the chat, she said, yep, you want it to be read by a human person. And she said, be consistent, never settle for verified. I love it. I love it. Kayla, she says, how much does purchasing a home drop your credit score?
So that varies. I want to say the main thing when it comes to purchasing a home that's going to affect is your DTI. What that is that your debt to income ratio. Typically, when somebody goes and gets a mortgage, that is typically their highest expense and their biggest asset for most people. So if you haven't had a mortgage for very long, it will limit you because the banks know that your mortgage is your highest payment and they know that you're going to be more focused on that than your unsecured funds for most people. You have to realize that you're competing with computers and we're competing with an average of everybody else in our location, in our region, and in America as well too, which is why I was saying, depending on the location, sometimes some of these banks pull from different agencies because they want to see the average for that particular area and how consumers are operating in that area. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And another one of our members, she has a question too. So I'm just gonna ask on her behalf. So she applied for the pledge loan in May. And then in June, her score dropped. So she's thinking it's because of the pledge loan. So so she just wanted like some clarification on that.
Okay. So anytime you open a new account, you are going to drop your score. And that's why I talk about the average age, because anytime you open up a new account on your profile, it brings down the average of all of your accounts. The more, the less credit age you have, your scores will drop a little bit. But again, if you let them age that 6 to 12 months, it will go back up. You just have to let it age a little while.
Perfect, thank you. And
Sure.
then Michelle had another question. She says, does deleting your average, like, is it true if you delete your address on your profile that it will increase your score?
So that is true a little bit, but not by a whole bunch of points. But I do want to say this in the credit repair process. I'm glad she asked that because in the credit repair process, if you have moved to new addresses and you have negative information tied to old addresses, the first thing you want to do is call everybody you bank with who is reporting and make sure that your new address is on there. And that is being reported. Once you have all of your accounts updated, your current accounts updated to your new address, you can go through and remove your old address. And 9 times out of 10, the way that these credit reporting agencies verify us is by our phone number and by our address. They don't actually, contrary to popular belief, we don't have reports that just sit in TransUnion, or they don't just keep a file on us. They tie the information to numbers, names, and addresses. But whenever you remove the address, because the negative information is attached to that address, they can't verify that that's you. And that's another reason that I say you want to make sure that you just have one address and one name, because all of the negative information becomes a lot harder to verify. So if they can't verify it, then they must delete it.
So the best way to do that is through sending like a dispute letter, because like on my credit, I have like 5 different variations of my name. And I'm like, what the heck is this? I was just looking at it last week. I'm like, this is ridiculous. They have like my name, maiden name. They have like, you know, an unofficial middle name, like just, it's crazy. I'm like, okay, this looks like 5 different people.
Yep. And that's exactly how the banks do it. So for Equifax, you have to send the letter in first. And then after you send in the letter, then you can call. They used to let you call, but they don't do that anymore. TransUnion and Experian, you can still call and update that info over the phone. If you have an Experian account, you can actually log into your Experian account and update your personal information directly from there.
Perfect.
But again, I always like to, but just as mentioned, the way I teach people to do it is always do it in writing first and then call, because we always like documentation, because like, I hate to say it, but they like these corporations, these people, they will play with you because they get paid to report this information. And so I always say start in the mail start in the mail first, because you want to be able to document what you're doing and your efforts to try to communicate with them the right way. Because if we have to go to an FCRA attorney, I like to get things removed ASAP just so that I can go on and get moved to the bigger bag. But if you do have to go to an FCRA attorney, you actually, so the reason that they get paid, the reason that they don't charge you up front to work on your case is because for each violation, depending on the violation and how many violations are on your credit report, each violation can be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. And so when you do go through the FCRA, that's what they're pursuing, is the payment from that. So that's why I always say keep the documentation, because it just makes it a lot easier when they know that you stand on the law. But they will try to play with you at first. Even when you mention, even when you start mentioning these laws, just as I mentioned permissible purpose earlier, they may think that, oh, he just heard about this, or this person just heard about this, but do they really know on this? And so that's why I say you have to stand on it, and you have to be consistent, and do not let them play with you. Demand what you need as a consumer. Do not request.
Wow, that is so powerful. Oh my gosh. Mr. Dorsey, you are a wealth of knowledge. Can you please tell us, like, what do you have to offer? Do you have like services? I know that you have a business. Can you please let us know, because you know your stuff. And I'm pretty sure that people are like, I need 100K in funding like tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. So so I primarily do funding. I do personal funding and I do business funding. We do currently we do offer one-on-one consulting and working with you to actually structure your profile and doing everything that you need in order to maximize your funding, both on the personal side and the business funding. We do offer those as a one-on-one service. Also, I am in the process of finishing up a course for the personal side and the business side. So some of these slides are actually from the course. This is just a simplified version to make it a little easier to understand. But I will be dropping a course very soon as well too, which will be available to the public, because I do a lot of calls like this one-on-one, and we are able to answer a lot of questions like this one-on-one, but we do this a lot. And so we've taken everything that we know, all the banks, all the processes, all the resources, and we've taken everything and put it into the course in order so that you can become your own bank and be able to duplicate this process for yourself and others as well too. But currently, if you are interested in working with us, we can put together something on Instagram. You can contact me on Instagram, and we do offer programs in order to work with you one-on-one, in order to get you to where you need to be, whether you are ready for funding immediately, whether you need to go through the credit repair or the credit building process as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kayla says, sign me up. And me too. I said, sign me up. Oh my gosh. I'm ready to credit card stack. I've always heard about it, but I've never done it. So I'm ready to stack a couple of credit cards. I want to be like the people I see on Instagram with 100 credit cards.
That's it. That is literally it. And I'm telling you, once you do it from the first time on the personal, you're gonna be looking at a whole different world. And that's why I say to people all the time, people don't realize that they can access 50 to 100, 150K right now, just by having your documents in order, just by having everything structured properly, which makes it a lot of opportunity for you to scale on the personal side. And the personal side is great, but like I said, 12 months later, you start to transition to the business side, and you're in a whole different world, a whole different world.
Right, exactly. Some people that I know on Instagram, and I've watched like some of their videos and stuff, like they have like $1 million in credit, like 1.2, because they're consistent and they're always stacking. So people, like, come on now, what can you do? Like, how can you leverage $1 million, right? You have to. So think about it. But I'm definitely pulling the trigger. So thank you so much, Mr. Dorsey. We appreciate you. And you know what? I have to ask you a question. Would you come back and do a business funding masterclass for us?
I would love to do that for you guys as well too. Like I said, putting them together would just be a little too long. It would be double this, so it would just be long and drawn out. But now that you guys do understand the personal side, I would love to come back and do the business side as well too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate you. Look, Kayla, she's like clapping and everything. We really appreciate you. You have really gave us that foundation that we need. You let us know how our credit needs to be structured properly, and the data points and everything like that. So I know that this community, we take action, and I know that that's what they're going to do. So thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I have no doubt I would listen, follow me, connect with me on Instagram. Let me know your wins. Let me know your questions. I want to see us grow, because the biggest thing that I like to do with these is it's not about the funding now. And I want to talk about the bigger picture. What we like to focus on is the funding now is great for individuals, but once we have the funding together, we can use group economics to really go out and make major moves together, and we can really talk equity in major areas. So the personal funding, business funding is great, but we can take this knowledge and we can really leverage and create partnerships and do much bigger things down the road. This is just the beginning of a master plan that we can all do together. So that's the biggest thing. Like I said, follow me, connect with me, let me know your wins, let me know what's going on. I would love to assist in any way that I can. And all the time I'm dropping game and giving tips any way that I can. So connect with me. I will make sure to connect with you all back. And like I said, I want to see where we really go. Like, what does the next 2 years look like? What does the next 5 years look like? This is just the foundation. Once we get in the door, we can, just like it says right there, we can buy back the blocks for sure and really start
Exactly.
generational wealth and talk equity. Funding is great, but the equity talk is a much bigger talk.
Exactly. I was thinking real estate too. I'm like, okay, let's buy an apartment building together, guys. 100 doors. Come on now. So definitely everybody needs to follow Mr. Dorsey. I text you. His Instagram is at CEO Dorsey. And I also text you his business page Instagram as well. So you already have it in your text message. Just hit that link and give him a follow. Send him a DM, let him know if you're interested in his services and getting 6 figures in business credit and personal credit. Okay, guys? So have an amazing night. I will see you guys on Friday for the book club at 7 p.m. And be blessed.
Thank you. Y'all have a blessed night.
Thank you.